That night, the streets of London buzzed with life, the city's iconic glow reflecting off the rain-slicked pavement. In the heart of it all, a nightclub pulsed with energy, its neon lights cutting through the darkness. George Woodhouse, a seasoned MI6 agent, moved with purpose. His destination was a private booth where Meacham, his superior, awaited him. The meeting was anything but casual. Meacham, his expression grim, wasted no time revealing the gravity of the situation. A rat had infiltrated their organization, leaking a top-secret software program known as Severus. The program, a treasure trove of sensitive government information, posed a catastrophic risk in the wrong hands. Meacham's investigation had narrowed the suspects to 5 individuals. Among them was Catherine, George's wife and fellow agent. The revelation hit George like a punch to the gut, but Meacham pressed on, urging him to act decisively. With only 1 week to uncover the traitor, the clock was already ticking. George, ever the professional, noted Meacham's personal struggles and offered to handle the situation himself, allowing Meacham to focus on his own affairs. With the weight of the mission now squarely on his shoulders, George began to formulate a plan. By Sunday night, George had set his plan into motion. He invited the suspects to a dinner party at his home, a seemingly innocent gathering with a hidden agenda. Known for his culinary skills, George prepared a meal laced with a subtle drug designed to lower inhibitions, making it easier to extract information from his guests. Catherine, unaware of her inclusion among the suspects, found the impromptu event suspicious. Her husband's decision to invite 4 colleagues, Clarissa, a satellite imagery specialist, Freddie, her managing agent boyfriend, James, another managing agent, and Zoe, the agency's psychiatrist, seemed unusual. George, however, offered no explanation, only cautioning Catherine to avoid the champagne. The 4 guests, equally perplexed by the sudden invitation, had convened beforehand to discuss their unease. None of them had any idea what to expect. As the evening unfolded, the guests arrived and were greeted by Catherine, who played the role of gracious host. They were ushered to the dining table, where the atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. In the kitchen, Freddie approached George, subtly hinting at James's ambitious nature. George, uninterested in Freddie's insinuations, brushed him off and returned to his preparations. The dinner began with light conversation about past missions, but the mood quickly shifted. Freddie and Clarissa, having sampled the champagne, began to loosen up. Freddie, emboldened, dredged up a painful memory from George's past, recounting how George had exposed his father's infidelity in a dramatic and public manner. George, unfazed, responded with a declaration of his disdain for liars. To steer the evening back on track, he proposed a game. Each guest would make a resolution for the person seated to their right, a seemingly harmless activity designed to elicit revealing responses. The game began with George, who made a resolution for Zoe. From there, the spotlight shifted to Zoe, who expressed a wish for James to curb his ambition. James, unable to deny his driven nature, accepted the critique. When it was James's turn, he directed his resolution at Clarissa, suggesting she explore relationships with men her own age rather than older partners like Freddie. Clarissa, unbothered, admitted her preference for mature men. Clarissa's resolution for Freddie, however, struck a nerve. She accused him of consorting with prostitutes, a claim Freddie vehemently denied. Turning the tables, Freddie psychoanalyzed Clarissa, attributing her accusations to unresolved issues stemming from her father's abandonment. The tension reached a boiling point when George interjected, revealing damning evidence of Freddie's indiscretions. He cited specific details about a hotel Freddie frequented, leaving him stunned and speechless. The confrontation culminated in a dramatic outburst, with Clarissa stabbing Freddie's arm with a steak knife. As the evening wound down, George and Catherine tidied up the table. When Catherine inquired about the identity of the traitor, George admitted he was still uncertain. Declining her invitation to retire for the night, he continued cleaning. It was then that he discovered a movie ticket in the trash can. The ticket, for a film titled Dark Windows, seemed innocuous at first glance, but hinted at a deeper mystery yet to be unraveled. In another part of London, the night was quiet, but the tension was palpable. At Meacham's house, the senior MI6 officer sat alone, nursing a drink. The weight of the Severus leak and the mole hunt had clearly taken its toll. Suddenly, Meacham felt a sharp pain in his chest. His breathing grew labored, and within moments, he collapsed to the floor, convulsing. His wife's screams echoed through the house as she watched helplessly, unable to save her husband from the fatal heart attack that claimed him. The next morning, George Woodhouse and his wife, Catherine, prepared for another day at the office. George, still processing the events of the previous night, invited Catherine to join him at the cinema after work. When he mentioned the movie Dark Windows, Catherine's reaction was curious. She seemed surprised, as though hearing about the film for the first time. As Catherine left for work ahead of George, he discreetly slipped an object into her bag. The item was a keycard, identical to the one used to access their office. George, carrying a temporary keycard, arrived at the office later and encountered Freddie, who delivered the shocking news of Meacham's death. The revelation hit George hard, but he quickly composed himself and headed upstairs to meet Catherine. In addition to informing Catherine about Meacham's passing, George executed a clever ruse to gain access to her office. He claimed to have accidentally left his keycard in her bag and requested hers to retrieve it. Catherine, preoccupied with a meeting attended by Arthur, the head of the agency, handed over her keycard without hesitation. With the keycard in hand, George entered Catherine's office unnoticed. Once inside, he began searching her computer for clues. His investigation revealed Catherine's next mission in Zurich, complete with coordinates for the meeting point. George meticulously recorded the data, determined to uncover whether his wife was the mole. Meanwhile, Catherine, oblivious to George's covert actions, sought solace in a session with the agency psychiatrist, Zoe. Known for her uncanny ability to extract detailed information from colleagues, Zoe was herself under scrutiny as a suspect in the mole hunt. During their conversation, Zoe meticulously reviewed the medications Catherine was taking, probing their effects and side effects. As the dialogue unfolded, Catherine revealed a recurring sense of panic, not rooted in fear of death, but in anxiety over financial security. Her obsession with money was deeply tied to her past, shaped by the struggles of her late mother, who had endured poverty. Elsewhere, George retreated to a tranquil lake, seeking clarity amidst the chaos. Casting his fishing line into the still waters, he reflected on the mounting complexities of his mission. Meacham's dire warnings about the Severus leak, Clarissa's request for a lie detector test, and the subtle expressions of his colleagues during the dinner party all swirled in his mind. His solitude was interrupted by James, who arrived bearing critical information. At George's request, James had delved into accounts linked to agency members. His investigation uncovered an account under the alias Margaret Langford, established in 2009 as a safe deposit box for funds related to the Myanmar conflict. After the conflict's resolution, the account was closed, and the funds were transferred to a bank in Zurich. James disclosed that Margaret Langford was an alias frequently used by Catherine in the past. The revelation deepened George's suspicions, prompting him to instruct James to keep the information tightly under wraps. That evening, George and Catherine fulfilled their plan to watch Dark Windows. Throughout the film, George observed Catherine's exaggerated reactions to the jump scares. Her responses, seemingly over the top, hinted at a deeper layer of secrecy, reinforcing his doubts. The following night, George and Catherine shared a quiet dinner at home, savoring the fish George had caught earlier. Shortly after, Catherine was picked up for a trip she claimed was to Paris. George, feigning ignorance, played along, despite knowing her true destination. At midnight, George made an unannounced visit to Clarissa's house. Startled by his arrival, Clarissa initially mistook him for an intruder. George reassured her and engaged in small talk about her relationship with Freddie, learning that the couple had reconciled after their dramatic fallout at the dinner party. George then revealed the purpose of his visit. He needed access to the surveillance satellite managed by Clarissa. To ensure her cooperation, he leveraged her secrets, threatening to expose them to Freddie if she refused. Reluctantly, Clarissa agreed, surprised by the complexity of George and Catherine's relationship, which appeared flawless from the outside. The next morning, George joined Clarissa in her monitoring room, where she was already stationed in front of her monitor. George provided the coordinates, and Clarissa selected the satellite closest to the location. Coincidentally, an idle satellite, previously used to monitor a single individual under house arrest, was available. Surveillance commenced, but they had only 3.5 minutes to gather intel. The satellite shifted its focus from the Russian region to Zurich, its movement tracked by the monitoring crew. The coordinates led to an empty bench in a park, but soon, the person they were observing arrived. George shared a poignant thought with Clarissa, reflecting on the nature of his relationship with Catherine. Despite their mutual surveillance, he admitted that if either of them saw their partner in trouble, they would do whatever it took to help them. Not long after, a bearded man joined Catherine on the bench. Facial recognition identified him as Andrei Kulikov, a lieutenant colonel in the Russian army. Using advanced technology, they attempted to read the pair's lip movements to decipher their conversation. It appeared Catherine was negotiating to purchase something. Unfortunately, the lip-reading application caused the system to lag, exposing the scene they had tried to conceal from the monitor supervisor. Meanwhile, in Zoe's office, tensions reached a breaking point. Zoe and James, whose relationship had been strained, decided to part ways. James initially resisted but ultimately agreed, on the condition that Zoe never disclosed the sensitive information he had shared during their time together. Among the secrets was classified intel about Severus. Shortly after, James received a call reporting an infiltration of the satellite movement. The same report reached George and Freddie, prompting an immediate summons from Arthur, the head of the agency. As the three entered the meeting room, Arthur laid out the gravity of the situation. One of the agency's satellites had been compromised, its monitoring capabilities disrupted for 3.5 minutes, a window that coincided with the movement of the person under surveillance. The individual in question was Vadim Pavlichuk, a rebellious Russian military general under house arrest. During the satellite's downtime, Pavlichuk had managed to escape. Adding to the chaos, another individual was reported missing, too. One of them was suspected to be Andrei Kulikov, Pavlichuk's trusted right-hand man from their military unit. Arthur revealed that Kulikov had an appointment that morning in Zurich with an unidentified individual. Despite the agency's efforts, no visual evidence had been obtained. The seamless coordination of events led Arthur to suspect a covert operation within the agency itself. The question remained, why was Pavlichuk's escape so significant? Arthur dismissed the other staff from the room, leaving only George, Freddie, and James to hear the classified details. Arthur suspected that Pavlichuk possessed a hard copy of Severus, the agency's top-secret software. Severus was not merely a repository of sensitive data. It also functioned as a trigger for nuclear reactor explosions. If Kulikov or Pavlichuk managed to transport the hard copy to Moscow, the consequences would be catastrophic. The British government risked being held accountable by the American authorities, escalating tensions between the Allies. George suggested seeking assistance from the CIA, but Arthur rejected the idea. For him, the internal leak was a matter to be resolved within the agency. He tasked the trio with identifying the individual responsible for the satellite's movement, granting them full authority to pursue the target. George found himself in a precarious position. Later, Clarissa, overwhelmed by the burden of secrecy, confided in Freddie. She revealed that George had ordered the satellite's repositioning. That night, Catherine returned to London. Before entering her home, she was approached by Freddie, who disclosed the dire situation her husband faced. If Pavlichuk reached Moscow, George could face 35 years in prison. Catherine, shaken by the revelation, instructed Freddie and Clarissa to keep the matter confidential. Her own mission in Zurich had yielded no results, leaving her clueless about George's motives for spying on her. It became clear that Catherine's agenda in Zurich was unrelated to Severus. As Catherine entered the bedroom, she lay beside George, facing away from him. Though they appeared to be at odds, both were consumed by their thoughts. Suddenly, they arrived at the same conclusion. They had been trapped. Someone had manipulated George into suspecting Catherine, while Freddie had convinced Catherine to sacrifice everything to protect her husband. Both realized they needed to create a surprise to uncover the mastermind behind the scheme. 2 days before the deadline, with the threat of Severus looming, George invited James to join him at a pond for a secret conversation. Meanwhile, Catherine tasked Clarissa with tracking Kulikov's movements, using an IP address she had obtained. Reluctantly, Clarissa complied. At the fishing location, George confided in James about his plan to conduct a lie detector test on the 4 dinner guests, including James himself. He also revisited the matter of the Zurich bank account, initially suspecting its connection to Severus. James provided an alibi, explaining that the alias Margaret Langford had been used by multiple individuals, not just Catherine. However, James inadvertently revealed that the agency was no longer investigating the alias, raising George's suspicions further. Meanwhile, Catherine met with a CIA agent, providing Kulikov's IP address and requesting intervention to prevent the leak of Severus. Elsewhere, Kulikov and Pavlichuk approached Moscow, their intentions clear. Catherine urged the CIA to deploy drones to neutralize the threat. She then confronted Arthur during his lunch, accusing him of orchestrating the entire scenario. Arthur, unflinching, confirmed her suspicions, stating that she was too late to stop him. At the same time, the CIA's drone tracked Kulikov's car, which contained the hard copy of Severus. The drone struck, destroying the copy and eliminating Kulikov and Pavlichuk. Though Catherine remained uncertain about Arthur's motives, she issued a warning. Her husband would not let the matter rest. Back in George's office, the lie detector test was underway. The four suspects, Zoe, Freddie, Clarissa, and James, sat tensely as George began with standard questions, each laced with subtle traps. The atmosphere was heavy with suspicion as George gradually shifted to the main agenda, Severus. His goal was to uncover how much each of them knew about the program when they first learned of it, and whether any of them had sold the state-owned software. As a follow-up to the session, George extended an invitation for a second dinner at his house. While everyone agreed, James's acceptance carried a note of reluctance, as though he felt the invitation was more of a command than a request. On the night of the dinner, James arrived late. The dining table was conspicuously bare. No food, no drinks. Instead, George announced a game. Each participant would answer a series of questions, and the one with the most incorrect answers would be declared the loser. The catch? The loser would be forbidden from leaving the table, with Catherine placing a gun on the table as a silent but potent threat. Ignoring the protests of his guests, George began the game. His first question was directed at Zoe. When was the first time you cheated on Freddie? The room fell silent as George turned to Clarissa, revealing that Zoe was the woman Freddie had been meeting at the hotel mentioned during the first dinner. Cornered, Zoe admitted to the affair, confessing that it had been ongoing for the past 2 months. Freddie, visibly hurt, had believed Zoe cared for him. However, her confession revealed that she had only been interested in extracting information from him. After the satellite incident, Freddie had confided in Zoe, warning her about Catherine's determination to protect George at all costs. The fallout from the game shifted the spotlight away from Freddie and Clarissa, both of whom were cleared of suspicion. Severus had failed to reach Moscow, bolstering Freddie's position as innocent. Clarissa, too, had only learned about Severus during the lie detector test. George's suspicions ultimately zeroed in on James. He accused James of planting the cinema ticket in the trash can and implicated Arthur as the mastermind behind the scheme. According to George, Arthur's goal was to destabilize Russia by orchestrating a nuclear reactor leak through Pavlichuk, the rebel general. For James, the operation presented an opportunity to ascend to George's position, using Catherine as a scapegoat. The truth unraveled further. James had indeed leaked Severus and had confided in Zoe about the operation during their relationship. However, James had underestimated Zoe's moral convictions. As a devout Catholic, she opposed the mass casualties that would result from his plan. The full picture emerged. James had manipulated George into aiding Pavlichuk's escape, while Zoe had used Freddie to push Catherine into protecting George. Catherine's trip to Zurich had been a diversion, enabling Pavlichuk's prison break. Meanwhile, George's satellite maneuver had been framed as an intentional act to facilitate the escape. Feeling cornered by George's precise deductions, James lunged for the gun on the table. In a moment of desperation, he confessed to poisoning Meacham. Unbeknownst to him, George had planted a sound recorder, capturing his confession. Panicked, James fired twice at George, but the gun was loaded with blanks. Catherine, acting swiftly, drew a gun from her bag and shot James. With the immediate threat neutralized, George enlisted the others to help dispose of James's body. Together, they dumped it in the pond where George often fished, ensuring the evidence would remain hidden. The next day, Catherine confronted Arthur at the office, demanding his resignation. Arthur, recognizing the futility of resistance, complied without argument. In the aftermath, George and Catherine reaffirmed their love for one another. When Catherine inquired about the Zurich bank account, George revealed that the £7 million it contained remained untouched.